Hello and welcome to the CIO Leaders Panel on how technology is bringing patient centricity to life. The patient is the most important stakeholder in healthcare. This session with the senior leaders of the Indian pharma industry will focus on how pharmaceuticals are working to connect with their patients with the use of technology. It will cover essential questions such as what is patient centricity and why is it important? How does the digital growth enable patient-centric companies and communication? Challenges, opportunities, and strategies as future enablers for a patient-centric approach. And we have with us a very strong and eminent panel. I welcome Abhishek Trigunet, CTO, ZS Associates India. Mukesh Rathi, Chief Digital and Information Officer, Dr. Reddy's Laboratories. Nandkishor Dhomne, VP IT and CIO, Manipal Health Enterprises. Rajiv Sikka, Group CIO, Medanta. And Sathya Prathipati, Senior Partner, McKinsey and Company. Thank you so much for joining us. And now I request Mr. Prathipati to kindly take over and initiate this discussion. Over to you, sir.
Deepti, thank you for that, and a big welcome to my fellow panelists, but also to everyone watching this session. We have an important discussion today, and for the next 30-odd minutes, the five of us will engage in a discussion on how technology is bringing patient centricity to life. We will open up for a few comments and questions from you over the course of the discussion, and while we'll reserve the first 30 minutes for the discussion we have, we'll open it up for questions after that. I think there are a couple of things that underline the conversation we're having today. First is, of course, the fact that patients are more informed and educated than ever before and are more empowered to take decisions with regard to their health, but also with regard to broader outcomes on well-being that they want to pursue. The second is, I think we are in the middle of a 10-year technology bull run of sorts in India, with different technologies coming into play across sectors, but definitely in healthcare as well. And third is, I think, the COVID acceleration that all of us have faced and seen over the last 24 months that technology has done to bridge the gap that the in-person connect had gone away during the pandemic itself. To get us started, I'm going to ask one question to especially Rajiv, Mukesh, and Nandkishor, and I will come to Abhishek after that, which is, as you look at the last 24 months, and if I was to define it as three periods, pre-2020, March 2020, during the pandemic, and now, which is maybe during 18 months into the pandemic, what are some of the initiatives and experiments that your organizations have taken to bring patient centricity to life using technology? We could start with that, and maybe Rajiv, if I could invite you first to take that question, and then maybe Nandkishor and then Mukesh to respond to that before we move on to the second part of the question.
Sure. So I think very relevant and relevant question. One part is that definitely telemedicine, the story is known to the whole world. Now, and we were clear that when a patient comes to Medanta, whether in OP, IP, ER, DC, he carries, bulk of reports in his bag of paper, which are like paper reports. What we have done is that we have converted each and everything into mobile phone, which means that patient doesn't have to carry this in a piece of paper. Each and everything is on this. So these are like simple examples which are known to each and everyone. There are a couple of other stuff we realize that I'm going to rattle a few of them. We realize that WhatsApp is the most popular channel which patient use it, and getting an appointment in Medanta for a Medanta consult is a very difficult task. Generally you have to go through OCC, you figure it out. What we have done is we have implemented a AI-based chat on WhatsApp in which you just say hi, and as soon as we figure it out what number is this, we list all the patients which are registered to this number. In case in a typical phone number you have more than one patient, so then it's done. You'll say which doctor you want, which specialty you want, whatever you know about a doctor's specialty, disease, a treatment pattern, you just enter it, and we'll give you a doctor with possible time schedules, and in case that time schedule doesn't match you, we'll give you alternate locations, alternate doctors, and so on and so forth. And within 1 minute state, you'll get an appointment challenge for a particular doctor, for a particular So that's what the beauty of tech is, and this is bound to stay. I'll give you another example. During pandemic, when we have a severe shortage of healthcare workers, we realized that nurses are doing some non-clinical work in IP rounds, which means that as soon as a nurse call bell is pressed, nurse has to run all the way from the nursing counter to the bedside. Now, patient may be asking for a blanket. Patient may be asking for a glass of water. Patient may be asking for a typical non-clinical stuff. So what we have done is that we have put a LSK video, on the bedside and on the nursing counter. So as soon as patient I'm calling from 5431, that's also registered. Please give me a water. As soon as we heard water, call will automatically get transferred to the FNV department, and nurse have to do nothing. And that's a very simple but beautiful example which we have addressed to when the gap was there with respect to nurses in a typical COVID ward. And this is bound to stay. So there are many such examples. I think it is not about the very high-end tech. It is all for finding a problem which was very prevalent at that time. And some of these are bound to stay till infinity.
Fascinating. Fascinating examples. Thank you for sharing that. Maybe I just invite Nandkishor, you from a network that originates from the Silicon Valley of India. So just thoughts from what your organization has been doing in bringing technology to make the experience more patient-centric.
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much and good afternoon, everyone. This is indeed a pleasure being part of this panel today. To answer your question, what is that we did during the pandemic, and even now we are doing that to sort of understand the patient-related concerns and how do we address those concerns. So what we did when this pandemic started, maybe more than a year before, the first thing we tried to do is that how do we enable the video consults? That was the first challenge for us because there was a complete lockdown, and then we had to have some alternate options to address at least the OPD services. So we enabled the video consultations, and not just the video consultations part, but also how do we allow a patient to do a registration online through mobile app, make the payment through online app which has the payment gateway integrations, etc. Do the video consultations with doctor, and also make sure that the prescription goes to the patient on his WhatsApp and on the email and on the app, and also allow patient to order his investigations and the pharmacy stuff online through the app. So it was like end-to-end journey which we configured as a workflow on the mobile app, and we started releasing further updates and further stability stuff to that particular app. So that was the first thing which we had to sort of take it up. Subsequently, we had to also ensure that during pandemic, when everything was completely shut down, there was a challenge for all the employees, especially those who are helping the supply chain area or the the HR domain, to make sure that the services are continued from home. So we had to sort of allow them in proper technology, give them proper technology to make sure that they are able to smoothly log in from their home, and make sure that those services are fulfilled. Whether they are logging into SAP portal and trying to make sure that the purchase order is placed on the vendor for the supplies and the deliveries, to create the GRN, receive the material, all of that. So the first part was more from the patient centricity perspective, where we worked on the online platform, the mobile app, to allow the VC consultation, etc. And the second part was, the work from home, because traditionally we are not very much used to, work from home kind of culture. So we don't have that into healthcare industry, unlike IT companies. So on both the fronts, we had challenges because we were definitely not ready from the infrastructure wise, and even from the entire application, and even the kind of maturity what is required to work on these kind of platforms, that wasn't there. But the advantage of this particular phase was that there was a pull from the stakeholders. We did not push this kind of technologies. There was a demand that they wanted more and more video consults and all that, especially from the clinicians community, right? So there was a good interest levels from doctors to use the mobile app for video consultations. So I think these were the two areas which typically we focused during pandemic.
Fascinating again. Thank you, Nandkishor, for sharing that. We can maybe skip industries now and move on to pharma. And Mukesh, just wanted to understand, what is it that you specifically, what the industry seems to be up to on bringing patient centricity to life and leveraging technology over the course of the journey of the last 24 months or so?
Sure. First of all, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this esteemed panel and share my point of view here. Very, very interesting examples heard from Rajiv and Nandkishor. Maybe I can add a little bit to that. First, a little bit of background of the company. Dr. Reddy's is a pharmaceutical manufacturer. Our vision of the company is we say good health can't wait, and very objective is to provide innovative and affordable medicines to our patients to make it more accessible, make it more widespread, make it more easier for all the entire patient journey. First, a little bit of context of the pandemic. So I think, like my other two colleagues, pandemic for us when it came, we are part of essential services and all operations had to run, including our manufacturing plants. So we have traditionally been investing into this whole agenda called digital workplace. And I think it was not very difficult for us when the pandemic hit to move to a fully work from home mode for whoever could, so that our plants continue to work, our supply chain work continues to run the way it is, so that we continue to manufacture products and they reach our patients. So that is one. Second, I think more to our core business. We are a pharmaceutical manufacturing company and we've never done vaccines before in life. We decided to actively look at creating a COVID portfolio to help patients across the world. We, for the first time, started venturing into vaccines. We brought Sputnik to India, as well as a bunch of other COVID-related medicines which help our patients. So, which is from the point of where the organization core is. Having said that, we as a company have always, despite sort of being the pill manufacturer to say, and we are sort of little 2 steps away from the final patient, have always been on the vision to see how do we move closer to the impact, that is from the pack to the patient. How do we continue to traverse the journey and become as closer to the patient as possible. We also extended that vision, and this has got nothing to do with the pandemic. This has been part of our strategy. That also how we traverse the journey from illness to wellness. Today, patients remember Dr. Reddy's when they are ill. How do we help them traverse the journey from disease management to condition management to good health management? That has also been our vision. And I will share 2 examples, one India and one outside India, around early stage pilots we are doing. So we as I said, we are not, we don't intend to get into businesses which are outside of our course. We will not do hospitals, we will not do, healthcare centers, etc. But leveraging our core, we want to see how we can play a very, very active role in the ecosystem to enable the illness to wellness journey as I was speaking about. So 2 examples here. One is outside India. Cancer is a big area where we intend to do a lot more with patients across the world. And we began with a pilot in Colombia and Brazil, where we've actually created an end-to-end platform to help from early diagnosis of a cancer to handholding a patient in the entire journey, through the cycle when one goes through the various iterations. The platform has 3 components. There is a component around the hospital, which enables the hospital to manage the patient journey better. There is a component around the patient and his corresponding caregiver, so that he's able to report his side effects. He gets continuous feedback around what nutrition he should take, how to manage the journey from there on. And there's a third component to help the payers and the insurers. We've sort of done a very successful pilot in Colombia. We are taking to other countries now, and very good feedback around patients who are using it. So that is one example. Another example, I think we declared it as part of our quarter 1 result. We created an ecosystem to bring OPD insurance to people in India. So India has a market primarily around what, from insurance perspective, OPD is not covered well. And we are doing partnership with OPD insurance providers. And the role we are playing there is to again create the ecosystem, to bring together patients, bring doctors, bring pharmacies, bring diagnostic centers onto one platform to enable the entire journey for a person who is from the point in time wanting to go to visit a doctor or do an online consult to fulfillment of the medicine to do a diagnostic test, and eventually sort of help him in the journey all the way from the identification of disease even to wellness and health. So that's a platform we launched like a couple of quarters back. early stages, still in the pilot mode, and we hope to scale into more in that space as well.
Very different in nature, Mukesh. So thank you for sharing. Very different from what we see in core healthcare. Maybe I come to you next, Abhishek, and you would have seen this in a slightly broader spectrum. I have a different question for you, which is, what are the technologies that you're seeing that are really making a difference at this point to patient experience and customer centricity, right? Obviously, technology is playing a big role overall in healthcare, but what specifically are the platforms, themes, specific technologies that are actually interfacing with business as usual to bring solutions forward?
Yeah, I'll probably answer that in two ways, Sathya. One is what you're saying now, and where I see it sort of moving into the future. So I'll try to combine them together because they're overlapping. I think we do see a lot of these telehealth, like chatbots, these patient-reported outcomes, these devices-based interconnection, whether it's the iPhones of the world or the Fitbits of the world and so on. So these connected devices are certainly coming in a big way. So that's one, with this connected ecosystem. The second is a little bit in terms of the real-world data, to access patient behavior. So whether you're trying to use it for trying to assess what are the patient's unmet needs, or if you're trying to assess that what are the unmet needs for the patients as well in terms of their behavior and key needs at a given point in time from a therapy standpoint. And then finally, AI/ML has to be in there, because the way you try to segment, the way you try to look at patterns, the way you're trying to identify and predict which areas to focus on. I think those are the 2 or 3 key areas that I would sort of highlight how technology is enabling what we are observing from the healthcare user base. Now, if I can tag it along with the other question about the future as well, that what do we see or where do we see it's sort of going ahead. I'll continue this hyper-connected a little more forward into the future with all these 5G and the IoT, the edge computing. All of this will allow us to create these hyper-connected world, and where a lot of these decisions are being made at the edge, more real-time, more closer to the patient than away from the patient. I definitely see that's happening. Companies are already trying to invest, in platforms are definitely trying to invest. The second is around the intelligent software, and building upon what I said earlier as well, that as AI, led by the data availability, of course, gets into this hyper, deep learning based intelligence system, we're looking at, genetic algorithms and quantum computing and stuff like that. We will see this integration of software and intelligence, AI. So I would say software plus AI, leading to more and more of this SAMD and SAC, as I call it, which is software as a medical device or software as a care element. We are going to see more and more of that. A lot of this platform thinking, some of you might be aware of this mRNA, what Moderna is doing. It's very much like a platform thinking. You're coming with a sequence, you change the sequence to identify what's going to work and what's not going to work on a common platform-based thinking. And the next one is around being personalized. Whether it's concepts of digital twins or genetics or quantum computing, all of them will continue to lead into this personalized medicines. So those will be at least the key ones worth calling out.
It's definitely a peek into the future, Abhishek, and I think we will come back to this as we connect more dots. It's a fascinating topic, and I'm going to pick on one theme there around personalization and move it back to Rajiv. Rajiv, obviously in healthcare, and you're in the I wouldn't call it business. You're in the profession of providing services, and obviously the patient experience is essentially defined by trust. Now, trust is seen more of a personalized physical world phenomenon historically. Now, with technology playing a role, how do you see that evolving? Do you see trust eroding? Do you see technology filling the gap? So what's the interface between trust and technology that you see with respect to you as a provider of services and your patients as receivers of service?
Sure. So I'll take one example, and this is my favorite example. I do remember a teller day when you stand in the front of a bank teller and there is a withdrawal slip, and if you are wearing a good white shirt with a suit, but even if you have 2 mistakes, teller will say, countersign it, and money will be given to you. And you have another guy, who may not be wearing that suit. Teller will tell him, go back, fill the form one more time. So after that, ATM came. Whether you are wearing a suit or you're wearing a short, or whether you have a 100 rupees withdrawal or you have 10,000 rupees withdrawal, tech is uniform, standard, and very, very personalized. I don't foresee that, that from when we move from the teller to the ATM, life have changed. I think life have become better. So I'll give you an example that how this translation we moved into the healthcare space. Most of the time, when somebody is trying to come for especially for a surgery or a treatment, which is like a complicated stuff, anxiety levels are very high. And it's very important to, calm down that. And we think that we have a patient even before the patient reaches the hospital or even before he make any touch with the hospital. So if you go to Medanta website, there is a 3D tour of Medanta, which means that, you can figure it out how my OT is going to look like. You can figure it out how 3 Tesla MRI machine is going to look like, how PET CT machine, how do you go inside and what is the behavior of the machine. So a lot of anxiety levels. So this is a pure digital personalized, activity, which will bring, reduce the anxiety and bring some trust. I'll give you another example. We very much realize that, and just imagine that, 18 months back, care away from the hospital was never thought, neither by the doctors nor by the patients. I do remember when Delhi government announced that care can be given at home for COVID patients which are asymptomatic or with with the given symptoms which are manageable at home. Nobody knew that how we are going to manage it, and within 48 hours of announcement, we started care away from the hospital, and we did more than 10,000 plus odd patients in 3 months of that launch. And it is not possible for any hospital to cater to tens of thousands of patients unless that element of trust is there. And how this element of trust came? Purely by help of a tech. We have a simple portal, a link used to go to the patient as soon as he or she enrolls, and by an OTP, patient get a simple dashboard in which he or she has to enter certain information. And as soon as that certain vitals are above and below the threshold, which are defined subjectively by our clinician, and intimation goes to the clinician, and it all goes from a doctor to the patient. Just imagine the kind of trust which you build with the patient, that my vitals today were not great and I got a call from my doctor office. So, and again, tech is not very great. This is a simple one pager HTML. Sorry, I'm a tech guy, I have to speak tech. Threshold below or, simple trigger, and we manage the show. And after that, life becomes so easy. Doctors, are seeing the trends of the patient on a daily vital score. And when the doctor is calling a patient, he doesn't have to ask you, what was your morning SpO2? What was your morning temperature? He has 7 days of trend, and the kind of comfort or trust patient gets because doctor knows his history, yet doctor is seeing you on a dashboard. But that's one simple example. So care away from the hospital, and despite no physical connect, the kind of trust which tech will bring. And just imagine that, the kind of gap which we have in the country, patient-doctor ratio, patient-nurse ratio, this by traditional method, no way on this earth we can fulfill. The number is going to be exponential, and hopefully if we don't put our act together, it will be hockey stick kind of a gap. So tech is the only way by which you can fill this gap and bring trust in this whole services, because this is all about trust.
Thank you. Thank you, Rajiv. Sorry.
I said I will take a pause.
Yeah, no. Thank you for that. I think it's valid. I don't think the purely physical interface can scale beyond a point. And I think as the burden increases, and you would have seen it, and you were under great stress these last 18 months on the healthcare system without the help of tech in some form or shape, there's no way you can service the broader demand. But on that point, Mukesh, I have another question for you, coming from pharma. I think we here in India are in our own echo chamber, do believe we use tech quite extensively and quite well to meet our objectives, whether it's on operations and manufacturing or supply chain or even on the customer side. But when you benchmark yourself as one of the leading Indian pharma companies versus some of the innovation that tech is with tech that's happening globally, where do you see yourself stand? Are you at the curve, ahead of the curve, behind the curve? or is it a kind of mixed bag? So where would you say your own tech journey in bringing it to customers is vis-a-vis some of the other countries in your industry?
A very sort of subjective and difficult to answer question. I'll try. So I think first a little bit of industry context. I think pharma as an industry is in general a laggard in this whole journey. It is sort of known to the world. Amongst them also, I think we are a generic pharmaceutical manufacturing company. So if I were to sort of do a packing order, the innovators surely invest a lot more on tech versus generic pharmaceutical companies. I would like to believe that amongst the generic pharmaceutical companies across the world, we tend to believe we sort of head and shoulders ahead. We are much ahead of the curve in terms of how we are thinking about digital tech to create innovation, both to the value chain as well as what difference we want to create in the life of our customers and patients. And I'll sort of share a little bit more detail. But if I were to compare myself with both some of the companies outside the industry, even brick and mortar companies outside the industry are doing a lot more, as well as if I were to compare myself with 20 odd unicorns which came up in Bangalore in the last 1 year, I think we are way behind and we have a lot to catch up, a lot to think and a lot to go. So that's where I would sort of define it to some extent. Having said that, things we are doing, maybe a little bit of a sneak peek to that. I think number one, we set out an agenda a few years back, which we call as digitalize the core. And essentially what we are doing as part of that is almost reimagining all processes of the company. But if you were a digital native firm and if you were to start afresh, how would we think about making that process? And at least for all the critical processes, can we do a 5x, 10x to each one of them when we rethink, reimagine along with digital tech, whether it is the way we do product development, whether it is the way we manufacture, the way we supply the medicines, the way we provide information to our customers, etc. So that is one journey we are on. And on top of this foundation is where we are again trying to do two things. One is we are doing a bunch of, I think Abhishek gave a good sneak peek. We're trying to use a bunch of digital analytics, various tools in terms of use cases, which could help us create a differentiation on top of what a typical process does, right? So whether it is in the form of robotic process automation, it is in the form of, a digital platform, advanced analytics, machine learning, AI, all of that, and I can share a few examples there. And then the third space is where we are looking at creating digital platforms to have a play in the healthcare ecosystem. And the example I gave around OPD insurance. So that's the stack in which we look at. If I were to share a few examples where we believe we've sort of done a little bit of innovation outside of what typically one ends up seeing. So let me take example of, say, robotic process automation. Typical use cases which one see in this space is around back-end processes, shared services, finance, invoicing, all of that. Of course, we are doing that as the rest of the world is. But we've tried taking it to the line. So we use robotic process automation into the most core of a pharmaceutical company, which is quality checks. And pharmaceutical operation by nature, one has to do a lot of documentation. There is a maker, there is a checker. Every document needs to prove that you made the medicine and tested the medicine the way it was supposed to be. And the entire checker operation, after every quality analysis, we've actually used cobots and robotic process automation, which more or less does it fully automatically. Now, it's not just about efficiency, it's not just about productivity. It's also about better quality, because when a person does the same check again and again, multiple times, one tends to get bored and one tends to do mistakes. But when a robot works 24/7, does not do mistakes, does not get tired. And if it's not good enough, we could add 5 more robots. So I think that is where innovation in this area helps. Second example, I think one of the key way we bring value to our patients is by creating faster medicines, which are helping meet unmet need of our patients. We've extensively started using data, AI, ML to essentially run digital twins of the processes which we do which was traditionally trying to find a formulation, then doing experiments to prove that the formulation works, eventually scale it, and then sort of do the filing. As much as possible, we've not obviously not close to 100%, but as much as possible, we wanting to do what we call as in silico experiments. So do experiments in the RAM of the computer rather than in the lab as much as possible, so that we reduce the burden of doing experiments or being able to move faster onto this journey. So that's a second example. Third example, if I were to pick up around how we go out and detail our medicines to doctors, so that they understand the efficacy, the safety, all of that stuff. I think there again, we've sort of done, number one, of course, we've done the basics. Each one of our medical representative carries iPad, does digital detailing. Every time there is an update on the detailing, we are able to sync it centrally and all of that. That is a given. We've sort of started doing true personalization on top of that. If a doctor has asked a specific question, or if sort of raised a specific need around a specific safety ask, whatever is the case, all of that gets recorded, and we are able to get back to each doctor at a personal level, n is equal to one level. As to this is what you asked, this is the information. This is what you were interested in, and this is the additional information you wanted to know about this therapy, this specific disease area, or this specific medicine. So I think we're trying to do stuff across the value chain. Lot more to do, but very, very exciting, very, very interesting journey.
Thank you, Mukesh. Enlightening to hear what you're doing, and it's good to see us being on the map as well. I just want to switch gears. We do have limited time, and there are several questions coming in from the audience as well that I'm trying to monitor. So maybe we just do one final round of questions, Abhishek, for you and Nandkishor. I think both of these are in your wheelhouse. So Abhishek, I come to you first. Here is the standard question that I think we get more often than not, which is, how do you see blockchain and artificial intelligence influencing healthcare? There is a revolution, especially on AI. And what are some of the use cases that are likely to come out of it across the entire healthcare value chain? So I know this is coming out of the blue, but I didn't know if you wanted to reflect on the impact of AI on our industry.
For sure. I mean, it's a fully loaded question. So let me start in the order that you recommended, the blockchain and then AI. So if you look at blockchain, and then just to dumb it down somewhat as I respond, think of it as a distributed ledger system. We're trying to keep records. So if we use that definition, you'll start seeing how many of these use cases, sort of start getting solved, which is to ensure the quality and the tracking of the drug all the way from the manufacturing down to the patient. Can we track that with blockchain and create that trust? I think Rajiv talked a lot about it from a trust standpoint. There's a lot of deficit from patients to the broader healthcare ecosystem. So can we track that? That's definitely a big use case that we're seeing. The second one and related one is a little bit around the supply chain tracking as well. This is more from a manufacturer standpoint. That how do you track where the drug is and at what point it is, and again tie it back with your manufacturing, your ERP systems of the world. So it's becoming a lot more dynamic in the sense of identifying down to the exact pill that where is it across the value chain from a supply chain standpoint. The third one, which I also feel is emerging in terms of the health records, as you're saying, which is for personal health records. As a patient, can I keep all of that and keep it in a vault, which is sort of backed by not a government custodian or the big tech custodian, but it is all controlled to a public, blockchain kind of ecosystem that probably I'll have more trust on. So that's a third use case that I can think of. But the key point here is that we see many of these use cases emerging, but many of them are sort of adaptation from other industries. Of course, financial is leading the way, followed by e-commerce, what I would say, and pharma is definitely adopting. So many more use cases is what I feel, especially as more and more constraints are coming up and adopting that in the healthcare space. We'll see blockchain continue to evolve. The next one, the AI, I think that's a dime a dozen example. So I'll pick a few more patient-centric, if I may. The first one is about the interactivity. We did hear again examples from a chatbot standpoint and so on, and how you interact with the system. How do you create it more of a two-way interaction? So it's not just about a question and answering based expert system, but it's also a system that is evolving and is intelligent as well. Trying to judge the emotions, trying to also judge the needs or perhaps the question that the patient is not able to answer directly using the medical lingo and so on. The other ones include in diagnostic space. We are seeing tremendous use cases where it's being used for diagnostic use cases all the way from lung cancer to eye diseases and so on. There are so many examples. The other one I can think of probably, and I'll pass the dice to Nandkishor, is also around these use cases of bringing in AI to drug discovery. That how do we create better drugs in the ecosystem, and how do we also do it in a more personalized way? How do we reach to the patients, especially for rare diseases where we don't have too much data? How do we do it in a more agile, more connected, more intelligent way to create better drugs for treatment of our patients? So I'll take a pause. Happy to expand more, as there are many use cases. AI is such a common foundational element of healthcare today. But I'll pass on to Nandkishor.
I have an add-on for Nandkishor before you go on, just so that we're covering the set of questions that we're getting from the audience as well. Nandkishor, along the similar lines, but I think a question we can't escape when we talk technology and healthcare is there is a big concern that our audience has around data security, especially when exponential data is available right now. And some of the things that Abhishek spoke about are going to be powered by data as well. What are you doing, and how can we ensure that there are highest level of safety across data to ensure, privacy, user consent, all of those are maintained and are not abused? It's another form of trust, of course, but how are we ensuring even now, and how will we ensure going forward that we, setting the bar on data security?
Thank you. I'm happy that you asked this question to me, and this was not in my mind, in fact, but then I would share a very real-time, implementation of this data security in Manipal, right? While we are developing lot many applications, whether you build with even core applications or your mobility and stuff, etc., and especially when you're dealing with the cloud kind of deployment, data security actually becomes a major concern. And we had actually faced this concern even with a couple of our suppliers. So what I would rather, say is that data security per se is not, an independent or a separate thing to discuss here. It's part of any application you want to deploy. So if, let's say you're, rolling out HIS or even a mobile app, the data security aspect has to be inbuilt or integrated part of that, delivery or that implementation. And obviously, we have those, mandates or those laws in place today. You have IT Act, you have privacy laws. There is a Disha Act, which is already there. We also have laws like HIPAA, etc. So those could be the key business drivers which can be kept into your consideration while you're defining the data security framework for your organization. What Manipal is doing, yes, we had done the entire assessment of the data security with our IT landscape, and this was done roughly around 5 years back. And we prepared an action plan to address those, concerns, those issues, and to fill up those gaps. And now probably is the third or fourth round which you have done recently to again, validate and assess the entire data security aspect. So data security is actually part of the regular assessment for Manipal. That's number one. Okay, and it's an ongoing exercise for us. So we keep investing on data security, and also we make sure that whenever patient data is shared with some third-party, suppliers, we make sure that there are proper agreements, legal arrangements are there in place. That is one. Two is from the systemic standpoint, when you're exchanging some data with third parties, we have to understand what is essential and what is not essential. Many times, you end up sharing the data which is not required for the processing. So it all depends upon what is the purpose you want to solve, and accordingly what data needs to be shared. Let's take one example. Currently, we are doing, let's say, an e-prescription project with one of our supplier, and that is hosted on the cloud. So not necessary that I need to send all the data to the cloud. Only some of the data is required, and that can be masked. Okay. So as soon as you do those kind of arrangements when you're exchanging data between two platforms, so you can take care of data security to a very large extent. So it is not only a systemic arrangement there. It is basically a legal arrangement, a contractual arrangement. Okay. And when you choose the suppliers, you have to choose suppliers who have good reputation in terms of the data security aspect. Also, as a part of our analysis of the suppliers, we do an assessment before we select the supplier, how far have they sort of invested into data security framework. So I think all of those boxes, when we check, that's a time when we decide that, yes, we can go ahead with this particular supplier. So that's one part of it. But once you implement all those things, the regular checks, regular audits, and assessment is the only way through which you can minimize the risks with respect to data security, because there is nothing 100% safe and secure. there would be some risk associated, and which we'll have to definitely keep monitoring and managing on day-to-day basis.
Thank you, Nandkishor. Mukesh, I know from a different industry and maybe a different set of problems that you face, but I just wanted your reflections as well on the data security question that was posed to us.
Sure. So, and just so that you're aware, we are fresh out of the oven. We had a data security breach, not data security, a cyber security breach, a cyber attack to the company about like 8 months back, last October. So learned it the hard way as well. Not that we were not serious about it. Nevertheless, I think when we think about security and privacy both, I'll first cover security and then a little bit on privacy. I think we think in three dimensions. I think one dimension Nandkishor covered very well, by design. So everything we do has to be incorporated by design. Second is a threat from external world. And the cyber attack we got is a very good example of a threat from the external world, and what we are doing to cover the perimeter. Make sure that we don't allow access to our systems by force, by otherwise, and phishing is like a very, very big threat. In many forms comes and hits us, and multiple examples all of us are aware. And the third one, which many a times gets ignored, is from inside. What if somebody decides to do sabotage from inside, and does your systems take care of that as well? And hence there is this whole concept of zero trust and all of that. There is enough and more tools and stuff around that. But I think a comment I wanted to make was, when one think about security, one has to think in all the three dimensions with all the equal importance. So that is number one. Number two, sharing a little bit of personal learning from the cyber attack I went through. I think typical approach to managing cybersecurity is, one says, of course, do everything to prevent, but at the same time, create a good response plan. That when you get attacked, how will you respond? How will you react? By default, our nature is, at least I was like that you put a lot of energy, 90% on the protection and maybe 10% on response. And it is only when you get hit, you realize, oh, I never put enough attention to response. And I think the way the world is evolving right now, one has to more or less assume that someday or the other one will get hit. And hence putting enough energy and focus to response as well. Assuming you will get hit, how will you react to response? So that's the second learning. On the privacy side, we are a pharmaceutical company. While we want to do stuff with patients, we cannot store patient data. And hence the corresponding regulation is lot more stricter. And a lot of work we do around being HIPAA compliant, ensuring completely de-anonymizing data which we want to use, full masking wherever relevant. Having said all of that, there is tremendous value in data. And hence, if one wants to create true value, all the more from personalization to at some point in time even monetizing some of this data, I think it is very, very important to think compliance from day one in terms of privacy, so that our ability to use the data in whatever form one is allowed to, one is fully enabled, because the long tail of value that will come from data, nobody is seeing today. We might sort of think that we are aware, etc., but none of us is seeing today. And that long tail, if you want to truly harness, I think the only thing on which it will build is privacy and trust. So that was my comment on privacy.
Fascinating. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you also for the breadth of conversation we've had today. I think ranging from just how are we doing as an industry vis-a-vis some of the others and other countries, to the concept of trust in the world of technology, to what new technologies are going to impact us, to, of course, data and security that we need to treat it with, given what people are entrusting us with. Thank you for the time. We have several more questions that we will not be able to do justice to if we try to squeeze it in, but maybe in a follow-on or to the organizers, maybe we can take those offline. But I wanted to thank our esteemed panel, Rajiv, Abhishek, Nandkishor, Mukesh, for spending the time. And thank you to the audience for spending the time with us in engaging on this conversation. Have a lovely afternoon.
Thank you,
Sathya, for being such a wonderful host.
Thank you.
Great questions.
Well, thank you for that wonderful discussion, and thank you to each of the panelists for sharing their expertise and experience with us. Well, coming up is the closing keynote. Do join us for the same.